Thank you for watching Rachel and Ralph's Reality Check, where us longtime political insiders give you the inside scoop on what's going on, the real unvarnished truth. And as usual, it's my co-host Ralph Benko. He's a weekly columnist for Newsmax, the co-author of the Capitalist Manifesto, and the co-founder and chair of the 180,000 person Facebook group, the Capitalist League. And you know me, longtime contributor to Townhall and editor and founder of Intellectual Conservative. So today we're going to talk about our latest articles. I wrote one about the border, how the Border Patrol is basically not doing its job. It's exposed in a book that just came out. And then we're going to move on to Ralph's article, where he discusses how all the hype over these crises going on right now is nothing more than hype. And finally, we'll round it up with our Blue Collar Blues segment. Today is the 50th anniversary of something. So to begin with my article, I did a review of this book by an old-time Arizona cowboy talking about how whenever there are politically incorrect incidents going on the border, relating to the drug cartels and smuggling, a lot of this stuff is getting covered up, and they're trying to whitewash it and make it look like it's not as bad as it really is. And so in this book I review, it talks about a longtime cattle rancher from New Mexico, right on the border with Arizona as well as Mexico, who was kidnapped by these drug cartels. And he luckily escaped after 26 hours at a gas station when they stopped to get gas. But when he went to authorities to tell them what had happened, they treated him more like he was a suspect than a victim. And everything got swept under the rug. And even though this happened, I believe, in 2016, there is not one single journalist that has written about this. I am literally the first journalist to write about it. The book that the old-time cowboy wrote, his name is Ed Ashurst, it has gotten no coverage, even though you would think this would be a major, huge incident. And so what's going on right now is I feel like the government is just downplaying these types of incidents, not letting the American public know what's really happening, and trying to pretend like it's not a controversy. They're going from calling illegal immigrants to migrants to try to downplay the problems. But the reality is the drug smuggling is not decreasing. And even though we have legalized pot here, a lot of the drug smuggling is still just smuggling pot. They're just shipping in less safe versions that are cheaper. So what do you say about this, Ralph?
Well, first of all, as an old Washington insider, but a swamp fox, not a creature of the swamp, someone who maneuvered my way through 3 White Houses, 2 executive branch agencies, the Congress, and innumerable policy advocacy and think groups and think tanks. I sat down and talked to one of the prominent Latino leaders who helped to negotiate Reagan's amnesty for the 3 million undocumented aliens, mostly Latinos, back in the Simpson-Mazzoli era, which was an amazing story. But one of the things that I was told by this person, I was not sworn to secrecy, but I'm not going to embarrass this person by mentioning their name, but it's somebody who I knew, who was in a position of authority, and who I had every reason to trust their story. Back in the days of the Reagan immigration reform, there was a dirty deal cut. I've written about this in Forbes, actually, calling upon Senator Marco Rubio to clean this up. But the restrictionists said, came to the table and were given, we're going to make this a crime. We're going to make this illegal. We're going to prohibit these illegal border crossings, which are really just a form of trespassing. You know, nothing. They're not like rape or murder or burglary, but still, we're going to make it into a serious crime. And then the people who are interested in having a more compassionate, welcoming genteel approach to the undocumented aliens coming here, the undocumented migrants coming here. We are not going to enforce it. So we are not going to appropriate the money to build a serious border patrol, a serious immigrations and customs enforcement agency. So we are going to technically prohibit it, but de jure prohibit it, but de facto permit it. And that created the current irregularity that we have that traps 10, 12, 13 million undocumented aliens, the vast majority of whom are hardworking, religious, patriotic, and in all other ways law-abiding and devoted to America. They're trapped here in this kind of twilight zone where they can't regularize their status to get a green card and work their way to citizenship. But on the other hand, they are tolerated, permitted to stay here because they're really a very valuable part of our society and our economy. So let me just tell our devoted listeners, Rachel, this was a dirty deal that was conscientiously cut back in the 1980s that has caused these anomalies that you're documenting right now that make no sense as a matter of law or ethics, but as a matter of politics, it's a carryover, and it's injuring both 12 million basically fine, upstanding migrants, and also the social fabric of the United States of America itself. It's a scandal, and I'm hoping, I called upon President Trump to regularize this. To my dismay, to my astonishment, he did not read my column in Forbes, or if he did, he ignored it. Okay, and now I've called in my column on Newsmax on President Joe Biden to pay attention and regularize this in a way that would be in the best interest of the United States of America, as well as the humanitarian interests of the migrants themselves. But let me just make one other point and then turn it back to you. The American people get this, okay? They instinctively, intuitively get this. There is a reason why Breaking Bad was the most popular TV show of its era, which is actually talking about this kind of thing, the narcos, El Pollo, so people know that something has gone terribly wrong, and the government has not put a handle on it. But the rank and file people of the United States of America, they know something is terribly wrong, and they really want to see it put right. And so columns like yours in Townhall are golden because it's putting out a call to action for how to set it right.
Okay, so I don't think most conservatives are going to agree with you that we need to normalize all these illegal immigrants, pathway to citizenship, whatever you're proposing. But I don't even think Biden is going
to. I'm proposing amnesty, okay? You can euphemize it as a path to citizenship, but what I want is amnesty, okay? And that's the right conservative point of view. Everything else is reactionary, not conservative. Wake up, girl. These people are conservatives. They are an El Dorado for the conservative movement. They are pro-life. They are pro-traditional family. They are pro-traditional marriage. They are they are faithful. They're religious. They're religiously observant. They are hardworking. They are in all other ways law-abiding, except for this cockamamie, stupid, corrupt law that was passed under Simpson-Mazzoli. Okay, they are more conservative than most of the professional movement conservatives that I know and run with. They are an El Dorado, a gold mine for the conservative movement, and why we're not demanding that they be given amnesty and the vote. According to the last two articles I've read, the Latinos are turning both Texas, they're adding Republican congressional seats to the Texas delegation, and they are the only hope that we can turn California Republican again. Embrace them, Rachel.
Okay.
I gotta want that. We want to legalize them. We want to give them amnesty. We want them to be part of the movement.
I got to push back on that. I have heard for years that Hispanics are supposedly more conservative on social issues and so blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Their voting record is still about the same as Blacks. It's still very leftist. So honestly, I don't see a whole lot of things changing. And we're not even just talking about Hispanics, illegal immigrants. I mean, this is just Hispanics generally. I think illegal immigrants are probably even more to the left than regular Hispanics. So I'm not getting my hopes up there. And
well, you've obviously never partied with them the way I have. They are to the right.
I went to Arizona Latino Republican meetings for years, okay?
They're the Latino rhinos. I'm talking about the real Latinos, the undocumented migrants. They are far to the right of you, Rachel Alexander. You don't want to let them in because they don't.
I have yet to see any evidence, Ralph. I mean, you know, maybe if you're really drunk, it looks that way. But I wanted to point out that I don't even think Biden is going to listen to you because the signals coming out of his administration in regards to the border and illegal immigration, I have never seen something so divided. On the one side of his mouth, he and Kamala tell the immigrants to stay in Mexico, stay in Central America. On the other side of his mouth, you know, they're letting them out, spread into the country, you know, without locking them up, just telling them to come back for court dates. I mean, it just goes back and forth. They are literally trying to have it both ways on the illegal immigration issue. Do you agree with me?
I totally agree with you. Welcome to politics, Rachel. All of these guys, Republican, Democrat, right, left, they're always trying to have it both ways. So I'm just telling you, these people are more conservative than you, and you should be listening to the 9th commandment, thou shalt not covet, and you should basically be saying, bring them on. And the reason they're voting left is because Republicans keep spitting in their face. If we stop spitting in their face, if we welcome them with open arms, the way they started to do in Texas, the way they're doing in California, boy, these people are native Republicans. They will flock to our standard and they will turn this country red. So don't be a kino, conservative in name only. Embrace the undocumented migrants and tell them that the Republican Party is Florida was a bastion of Democratic states until the Cubans, who happen to be Latinos, arrived here in the Mariel boat lift. And maybe you don't know this, so let me get you woke, okay? The Cubans all flocked to the Democratic State Committee and said, here we are, take us. And the Democratic State Committee said, hey, you're just more mouths to feed. We don't need you. We're already running this place. So bugger off, okay? So the Cubanos, the Mariel boat lifters, they were desperate enough to go to the Republican State Committee and say, here we are, we want to volunteer, put us to work. And the Republican State Committee was so desperate for anybody who would join ranks with the Republicans and help the Republicans gain power that they said, okay, amigos, come on in. And guess who's running Florida now? The Republicans, because because the Florida Republican Party absolutely enthusiastically embraced the Hispanics. So same thing nationwide. If the Republicans actually want to dominate the politics of this country, they will be begging the Latinos. They'll be doing favors left and right for the Latinos. They'll be begging the Latinos to join the Republican Party, not just as party members, but as party officials and as elected officials. So, you know, they're an El Dorado. They're a gold mine for us conservatives. And so wake up and smell the Colombian coffee, Rachel.
Okay, well, you know, the Cubans are a good example that we can emulate. And since Republicans have made inroads in recent years into Blacks, I don't see why we can't do the same thing with a lot of these new Hispanics coming into the country. I just think it's a lot more difficult than it seems because it's natural. If you are very poor and you're coming to the United States and you can't speak English and the Democrats are offering you welfare, it's more easy to migrate to that party. So it's going to be a lot more complicated. I don't think it's going to be necessarily that easy, but I do like the fact you brought up the Cubans because when they came here, they obviously had language barriers. They were obviously very poor too. So if we could get through to them, why can't we get through to these other Central American immigrants?
Yeah, and let me just anchor one more point with you, okay? Almost all the Latinos are either religiously serious Catholics or evangelicals. They do not want welfare. They want work, because work has dignity. And if you think that the Democrats have a winning hand by trying to bribe them with welfare programs, okay, you are just wrong. I'm not saying that the Democrats and the progressives aren't trying to do that. Yes, they are, but that is offensive to the vast majority of Latinos who want honest work, hardworking people.
Well, I hope you're right, because the numbers of illegal immigrant children on welfare is sky high. That is a problem. And I don't know what you recommend to like get around that problem, but the numbers don't lie.
I'm not trying to get around that problem. I believe that the Republican Party was put on earth by God to create good jobs, good, honest jobs, so that people can prosper through their own, with dignity, through hard work, and rise from working class to middle class to affluent. That is why God invented the Republican Party, but the Republican Party has lost its way and it's become the party of the rich. And it's a shame. We need to be, we Republicans,
Okay, honestly, Ralph, if the Republican Party has become the party of the rich, why don't I know any of these people? I have been in politics for years and years and years. I don't know any rich people. Everybody I know who's an activist like myself is close to broke. We're not doing it. We are not making it. Everybody I know who's wealthy is like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Barack Obama. I mean, everybody I know with wealth is on the other side. Everyone who I get along with, they're always begging me for money. I can't tell you how many friends I have given money to in the last few months, because everyone on the right I know is broke.
Because you're a conservative activist. You're not a Republican. Republican, you know how I can tell? What country club do you belong to, Rachel?
Nobody belongs to country clubs anymore. They're like, they're almost like a nothing anymore. That's old school.
The Republicans do. Real Republicans belong to country clubs.
I don't know a single person who is a member of a country club.
You're a conservative activist. You're not a real. You're a real conservative. You're not a country club Republican. You never were, and you never will be.
Wait a second. I was vice president of the Washington State Young Republicans. I was president of the University of Washington Republicans. How am I not an establishment Republican?
You've never been, I've known you for what, 10, 20 years. You've never been an established Republican. You've been out there with the Tea Partiers. You've been out there with the demonstrators. You've been out there pushing as a conservative activist and a conservative operative. The Republican establishment doesn't like your kind. They think you're just as bad as the Hispanics.
Okay, but I was like running, Republican parties when I was in college Republicans and young Republicans. So if the establishment doesn't like me, then why was I allowed to be presidents and stuff and call the shots?
Because those were considered to be sort of trivial little, cute little sidebar things that didn't really have anything to do with. It was kind of like the Little League.
What about Kelly Ward, our Republican state chairman here in Arizona? Okay,
what about her?
She is the opposite of a country club person, and she happens to be a doctor, so she actually does have some money. But that's the person your country club Republicans, wherever they are, because I don't know them, that's who they don't like, and she's running the whole Republican Party here in Arizona.
Well, good for her, but you've made my point for me. Thank you very much, Rachel. Another rich Republican, okay, or another affluent Republican.
Okay, that's one. That's one. One I know who's rich.
Okay, thank you for making my point for me. Okay, let's pivot over. Thank you for your brilliant article in Townhall about the underfunding of the Border Patrol and the fact that the Border Patrol has not been effective at fighting the drug smugglers into Arizona or New Mexico. Okay, but I'm just telling you, that's the artifact of a long ago dirty deal that was made to pass laws and then not enforce them. And I'm hoping, since Donald Trump refused to take my wonderful advice at Newsmax, to sort that out.
Because you bashed him too much.
I hope. No, I'm not a Trump basher. Okay. In fact, all of my Trump basher friends are suspicious of me because I'm not mean enough to Donald Trump. I'm also not a Trump idolater like you.
I knew you were going to get that back at me.
So all of my, worshipers of the God Emperor Trump, they don't like me because I'm also not an idolater of Trump. Okay, I'm a pragmatist. I like to see good things done. Since Trump wouldn't do it when I told him what to do, I'm hoping that Biden will read my columns and he'll do it. But I'm not very optimistic about it, frankly. I think the chance that Joe Biden will take his cues from me is probably like slim to none.
Okay, so moving on to your cool column about how there's all these crises going on and everybody acts like it's a big deal, but I mean, a lot of it's just mainstream media trying to get clicks. So what do you think?
Well, it's not just mainstream media. It's, lots of media trying to get clicks by, going in hysterics. They take problems. They're real problems. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to dismiss many of the, I mentioned 10 in my Newsmax column. Okay. And I'm not saying that they're not problems. In fact, I identified one of them, which is endemic racism, to be a true crisis, even though it's a slow motion crisis. And I'm very proud to see that America is finally addressing it and taking it seriously, because I do believe that that is a moral, social, and political crisis that has been overlooked for far too long. Okay, but you've got things like the so-called democracy crisis. That's nonsense. Both the Democrats and the Republicans are maneuvering to try to change the rules to their advantage. There's no crisis there. People are, the Republicans are screaming about ballot integrity, and the Democrats are screaming about Jim Crow laws. I think Joe Biden called it the Jim Eagle laws, and it's like nonsense. Black people, Hispanics, Asians are perfectly capable of registering to vote and proving who they are before they register. Okay, here's my driver's license. Don't have a driver's license. Here's my state, my state ID. Okay, it's not exactly yes, the Republicans are pushing that because the Republicans want to privilege Republican voters and prejudice Democratic voters.
Oh, okay. You believe that?
Yeah, I believe it. I know it. I grew up in a Democrat, and the Democrats are trying to privilege Democratic voters. And
I have never heard one person admit that about Republicans wanting to privilege wealthy white Republican people over, minorities and the poor. I've never ever heard that, and I've been in politics my entire life.
Of course, they won't admit it. It makes them look bad. Okay, what they
But
really
want. They would admit it to me behind closed doors.
No, because it's called confirmation bias, and they think that they're being virtuous. But it just so happens, I've been watching this as a Washington insider. Everything the Republicans do somehow, magically, coincidentally, it privileges Republican voters. And everything the Democrats do in terms of rule changes and stuff like that, magically seems to advantage people who are more inclined to be Democrat voters, motor voter and
Motor voter was implemented here. Actually, not motor voter. It was absentee ballots for everybody. Was implemented by Helen Purcell, a Republican county recorder here in Arizona. She was one of the first county recorders in the entire country to implement absentee ballot voting for everybody.
And she must have figured out that that would be beneficial for the Republicans, because frankly, I think all of the politicos are out there to reinforce their own advantages. I don't think that they're out watching out for the rank and file people like you and me. I don't think they're out pushing for social justice. I think they're out to win. And if they can manipulate the rules in a way that will advantage their party, they will.
Well, back when Purcell implemented them, I don't think she thought it would benefit Republicans. And her Maricopa County election director, Karen Osborne, was a registered Democrat. So I don't think she implemented it to benefit Republicans. She took a lot of heat for it at the time.
By whom? From whom?
A lot of people on the right, thought it would benefit Democrats. I mean, but it's ended up being kind of a mixed bag how it's turned out. I think she just did it because she thought it was the right thing to do.
Okay, well, once in a while you get a starry-eyed idealist inside the political system, and they do stuff that they think is going to be good for the civic benefit, and maybe she was one of them. But frankly, I think most politicos are out there trying to maneuver and manipulate advantages for their party. And you know what? It's just human nature. It's hard for me to get really outraged about it. So in my column, I said, here are the 10 problems, real problems that have now been escalated to crises. There's the pandemic crisis, and its echo also promoted to a crisis, the Delta variant, which is, visiting people who are not smart enough to get and to get vaccinated. Any of my listeners who haven't gotten vaccinated, shame on you. Go out there, get yourself vaccinated.
No, we weren't going to go into COVID on this show. Because if you want to go into COVID, my brother researches COVID every single day. So I'm up on the stats more than anybody.
Okay, well, then you know that most of the people who are getting, the vast majority of people who are getting hospitalized or dying from Delta.
It's not a vast majority. It's like 60-40. It's 60-40. It's not the vast majority at all. That's a lie. And a lot of these vaccines aren't even that effective. Israel just did a study that 2 of the main vaccines are only 62% effective against COVID.
It depends on how you define effective. According to my reading about this, and you're actually more erudite about this than I am, that yes, you can still get it. You can still get the Delta variant, but your chances of getting hospitalized or dying are vastly smaller if you've been vaccinated.
Nope, so, it's 60-40. 60% of the people in the hospitals are unvaccinated and 40% are vaccinated. If you dig to the bottom and like get the real numbers, unfortunately, the mainstream media isn't reporting the truth.
Well, you know what? You should write a column about that.
I've written plenty of columns. Go read my articles at Arizona Sun-Times. I just exposed how the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons, which, as you know, is the conservative equivalent to the American Medical Association,
right,
does not recommend mandatory masks in schools. And they go into like why there's psychological damage, as well as all the carbon dioxide problems, but nobody's reporting that. You're never going to hear that. All you're ever going to hear is the American Association of Pediatricians wants mandatory masks in schools. And you know why? That's the most liberal doctor out there, is the pediatrician.
Well, all I can tell you is, from my perspective, our team is biased our way and their team is biased their way, and it requires I just got vaccinated, and because I really, really, really like you, I hope you're vaccinated too. Okay.
I'm not even going to talk about that because I don't think that's anybody's business. Choice I make.
As for the masks, okay, I'm wearing that mask. It's now mandatory in Montgomery County, Maryland, where I live. But I don't like masks. They're a hassle, but I wear them when I'm indoors and when I'm indoors in shops and stuff like that.
It's virtue signaling.
Well, okay, but it's also the law, and so I'm.
It's not the law here in Arizona. Thank goodness we got a decent governor.
It's the law where I am, but oh my gosh, a decent governor. You probably like you probably like Ron DeSantis too, don't you?
They're not to love. If Trump doesn't run for president, that's who I'm supporting.
That's considering that he's turned Florida into the hottest of hotspots.
Really? It's all the blue counties in Florida that are the ones that are the hotspots, but don't expect the mainstream media to point that out.
Well, I think since I can't follow you, you publish in so many places. I can't follow all of your writing. I hope you write a hard-hitting
column. You can subscribe to my writing at author.com/Rachel Alexander.
I'm going to do that right now. So say something to keep our vast viewership entertained while I sign up for your.
Well, we do need to wrap this up soon. So did you want to go on to the last blue collar? The 50-year anniversary.
Yeah. As it turns out, that the classical gold standard done right is the most powerful formula for equitable prosperity. When Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971 through 1973, median family income flatlined and the rich people took off like a hockey stick. So Nixon on August 15th, 1971, 50 years ago today, I know that was before you were born, but I remember it well. He said, and let me lay to rest the bugaboo called devaluation. He said, the dollar tomorrow, unless the dollar tomorrow will be worth just as much as the dollar today. Now, in a very Nixonian way, that was true. On August 16th, 1971, the dollar was bought just as much as it did on August 15th. But in the following 11 years, because Nixon took us off the gold standard, the purchasing power of the dollar dropped by 85%. A dollar today buys 15 cents worth of what a dollar in 1971 caused. And if you look at the statistics, and I've written plenty of articles about this, people can Google Ralph Benko, X marks the spot. I've written about it at the National Pulse. I've written about it at Newsmax. I've written about it elsewhere. Okay, you can see the chart that both the working people like you and me and the rich people were going up like this, and then Nixon took us off the gold standard, and working people went like this, rich people went like that. It was like a hockey stick. So all of this income inequality that the progressives whine about, they're right. That kind of dramatic income inequality is inequitable and wrong, but they're totally wrong about how you solve it. They're proposing things like taxing the rich, which is never worked, because the rich have more political power than us, and so they just they make political contributions to the Congress to gouge out, to raise their taxes nominally and gouge out these huge loopholes so they don't actually have to pay it.
Okay. That's about the best I've ever heard anyone express it, Ralph. I love it.
Right, and with regulation, which tends to privilege the incumbent big business because they can afford to comply with the regulations, and little startups like yours and mine, we don't have all the money to buy the lawyers and the compliance officers and stuff like that. So it stifles competition against the incumbent big guys. It squashes us little guys. So the progressives are doing this exactly backwards by proposing to raise tax rates and proposing onerous regulations. And by the way, another one of Nixon's sins is he invented the EPA. The EPA was enacted on his watch. Okay, hey, I'm all for environmental protection. I'm just very skeptical about the power, the righteousness of agencies to really bring it about. They tend to become subject to regulatory capture, and therefore the incumbent big businesses get them to write regulations that privilege the big businesses and lock out the insurgents who could actually come up with new innovative technologies that will really help the environment. Okay, so 50 years ago today, Nixon torpedoed the key source of equitable prosperity by temporarily, quote unquote, 50 years later, closing the gold window in the Bretton Woods international economic monetary system, causing floating exchange rates instead of fixed exchange rates. And yeah, Bretton Woods was flawed. Bretton Woods said the dollar was convertible into gold and other people's currencies were convertible into dollars, and therefore it created a run on the dollar. Everybody wanted dollars, and then soon there were too many dollar claims to be redeemed against the amount of gold that we held. So yes, it was a mess, but it was up to Richard Nixon to mend it, not to end it. And he ended it, and we've been paying the price ever since. And the people who are really paying the price are blue collar working people like you, me, and the American undocumented Hispanic population who are
you had to bring that all full
who are paying the price for Nixon's crime against humanity. And by the way, Richard Nixon saved my life by abolishing the draft just before I got drafted and shipped off to have my posterior shut off in Vietnam. So
Wow.
I'm not a Nixon hater. Nixon saved my life, but this was a serious crime. And Tom Paine, the author of Common Sense, which kicked off the American Revolution, and the author of The Crisis, which generated enthusiasm for General George Washington and the troops. He wrote a piece called on the affairs of the bank and whatever it is. And he said back in 1789 that whoever proposes to make paper money a legal tender, like Nixon did by closing the gold window, deserves to be impeached and sooner or later may expect it. So how's that for prophecy?
Wow, that's awesome, Ralph. So I'm not going to go on because we've taken up too much time already, and we don't want to turn into the Joe Rogan 3-hour talk show. But I agree with you 100%. And so, are you really considered like the foremost expert on the gold standard today?
I'm one of the top. I'm probably appropriately considered one of the top dozen. Okay, I was called by the U.S. Treasury Department to be one of the 23 official witnesses of the Reagan Gold Commission back in 1981. I was the editor and main contributor to the Lehrman Institute's The Gold Standard Now, which was the definitive website on the gold standard. It's been closed down, but you can still see my blogs there, hundreds of them, 400 of them, millions of page views at theclassicalgoldstandard.com, which I set up on the internet. It's not very pretty, but at least the text is there. I've written scores, if not hundreds of articles about the gold standard for places like Forbes and the National Interest and Fox News and CNBC and whatever. So I've written about it very extensively. And by the way, I'm not a gold bug. This is all the gold I own. This particular ring, which I inherited from my godfather, maybe a couple of molars there are plated with gold. But I don't believe, like the gold bugs, that gold is going to go to from $1,700 an ounce, where it is now, to $5,000 or $25,000 or $50,000 an ounce. I'm not buying it.
Well, there goes all our advertisers, potential advertisers.
Well, we love them. In that case, bring it on. But I'm just telling you, since Alexander Hamilton invented the American monetary policy, which was technically a bimetal gold-silver standard, but he overvalued gold slightly. And so it essentially turned America into a de facto gold standard. It was wonderful for equitable prosperity. It was wonderful for equitable prosperity for 150 years. Everything we've done since then has been absolutely mediocre compared to that in terms of economic growth for us working people. If we had been on the gold, if we had the same growth rate, Steve, by the way, the New York Sun just had 8 wonderful articles on the gold standard, and they're going to have the most wonderful of all, mine, in the next day or two. Okay. Right. So nysun.com. And Steve Forbes, in his article there, because he's a heroic gold advocate, he said if we had maintained the same growth rates since we had left the gold standard as we used to have on the gold standard, we would all be making 50% more today than we currently are. So if we're making $50,000 now, we would be making $75,000. If we've been making $80,000 now, we would have, based upon the trend lines under the gold standard, be making $120,000 now. What's not to love about that, except for the fact that it's very out of fashion, and the progressive economists are just poo-poo it. But we supply-siders are really used to being ridiculed. But when we entered the field, and the supply-siders, Jack Kemp, were pushing for 2 things, and that was cutting marginal tax rates, and we cut them from 70% to the top rate from 70 to 28%, and a stable dollar, preferably under the gold standard. Okay, when Reagan declared for the presidency in 1979 on the supply side agenda, the Dow was at 814. It's now at 35,000. Per capita GDP has doubled, even though that doubling stopped around the year 2000, when George W. Bush and Obama and Trump abandoned the supply side policy, and we've been chugging along at 1 to 2% growth rates instead of 3 to 4% growth rates. Okay, but nevertheless, we doubled per capita GDP back in 1979. Per capita, that means you and me, GDP was around 30,000, and now it's around 60,000. Okay, if we had hung in there with the gold standard, it would now be something like 90,000. Okay, and just to spread the wealth around a little bit, in 1979, world GDP was $11 trillion. It's now $88 trillion, 8 times higher. That's not adjusted for population and it's not adjusted for inflation. But our formula of the goal of stable money and lower tax rates have pulled 1 billion people around the world out of poverty. Okay, we feel really good about that. And the progressives and the socialists and the communists, excuse me, I'm repeating myself, okay, have nothing to show for that. Nothing. They can't hold a candle to that, which is why Bill Collier and I wrote the Capitalist Manifesto, because capitalism really works, and capitalism works best when it comes to low marginal tax rates and stable dollar, and of which the gold standard is the gold standard. And I'm talking about for working people. I'm talking about for you and me, the Mariannes and the Gilligans. You're Marianne and I'm Gilligan, in case there's any doubt in your mind. I'm not talking about Thurston Howell III and Lovey. I don't care about the rich people. I don't like rich people. I say lock them up in country clubs where I don't have to deal with them. They're a bunch of snobs and they're really boring.
Funding someday for rich people, so watch out.
Well, so far they've missed their opportunity, but once they start funding me, I'll start saying nice things about them if you think that will do the trick.
I'd say.
But I'm here for the Gilligans and the Captains and the Mariannes. Okay, I let the rich people fend for themselves. And the gold standard is the working person, the working family's best friend. And this is the 50th anniversary of President Richard M. Nixon torpedoing our secret sauce that would bring us from struggling into middle-class affluence and even opulence.
Well, thank you, Ralph. And I want to encourage our readers, go do a search on Ralph's name and gold standard if you want to thoroughly understand it, because he's written the best stuff that I've ever read on it and really enhanced my understanding of the issue. And I just want to end this note saying, Ralph, this is the first time I have really felt like our show sounds like William F. Buckley Jr.'s firing line. So thank you for that.
And this is the first time in our show, or in the whole 10 years that I've known you and loved you and we've been friends, that you've ever agreed with me about anything, Rachel. It's fine.
To many more of these, Ralph. Thanks for watching, everyone. God bless.
Live long and prosper.